Hey, thanks for coming. Can you guys hear me okay? Good? I feel like we should be doing one of those like silent disco things where everybody's dancing, except I can't hear any of the music that you're hearing, so it's a little strange, but I'll try to get used to it. So 20 minutes is a very short amount of time to give a presentation. I want to jump right into it, and we're going to be talking about cryptocurrency today. Let me give you a brief, let me see if I can make this work. Do we have clicker problems here, maybe? Let me see if I can get this working. Okay. We're going to restart this so everybody gets a moment to take a look at this beautiful cover art that I've created. Okay, there we go. So, a little bit about me. I have been programming for a very long time. Anyone that grew up in the 80s, you may know if you used a computer then that there was really no such thing as Windows or a GUI, so you had to basically know how to program in order to operate the thing. I moved to Silicon Valley in 2007, probably most well known for starting AngelList, which is a platform for startups. We've helped startups fundraise over $1 billion through our platforms. We also help startups recruit. How many people know about AngelList, by the way, in the audience? Okay, awesome. And then I've been into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies since about 2012, and we decided to spin a company out of AngelList focused on cryptocurrency called CoinList, which is how I got involved in the crypto space, and I've been doing that since 2017. So let me see, maybe I need to stand right next to this thing to make the clicker work here. I think maybe I'll just, it's still, yeah, I know. Maybe I should just tell you when to go forward if you want to, yeah. Yeah, so you can advance through this one. Hold on, guys. Just a second. Okay, there we go. Now it's working again. So, speaking of bubbles, I just wanted to say there have been so many in my career. When people talk about bubbles, they think mostly about the dot-com bubble. So, as I came into high school, the dot-com bubble was just starting to take off. And I thought, wow, this is going to be great. I'm going to be a programmer, get into tech, make a ton of money. And then by the time I got to college, the exact day that I showed up at my university in 2002 was the lowest point after the dot-com bubble burst. And literally the faculty of the university sat down all the incoming computer science students, and they told us that we needed to change majors because none of us were going to get jobs because the bubble had burst and there was no interest in the internet anymore. Thankfully, I didn't listen to that. I moved to the Valley. I finished my degree, moved to Silicon Valley, probably the smartest thing I ever did. And we started AngelList in 2010. And yet again, I was hit with more talk about a bubble. There was talk of a seed stage funding bubble. So seed stage, for those that aren't familiar, is the first money that goes into a startup. It's the angel round, usually before a company has traction, before it has a product. And you could see that in 2010, the amount of seed stage funding rounds was starting to really separate from the amount of mid and later stage rounds that a VC would typically do. And people were saying that this was a funding bubble, a seed stage bubble. And they were advising us against kind of fueling that by starting AngelList, but we didn't really listen to that. And we're pretty thankful that we didn't listen because, for example, one of the very first companies that we sent through AngelList was a little known company called UberCab. You may know them now as Uber. They decided to drop the cab. They may drop everything else, it seems, but who knows where they're going. Uber raised a $1 million round on AngelList at a valuation of $5 million. Now this was, as you can see in the pitch that we sent out, the app had been live for 2 weeks, and they had made 10 trips per weekend in San Francisco. That was the traction they were pitching investors. Now, how in the world would anybody have thought that someday this was going to be a $50 billion plus company that everyone in the world would have on their smartphone, changing every single thing about how we move around? Maybe not here in Denmark, but in other countries, of course. So obviously that paid off. The bubble may have been a real thing in the seed stage, but we're glad that we went ahead and started with that. So then we get to 2017 and decide to do something in crypto. And of course, now we have a bubble yet again, except this time it's in blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And everybody in the audience, but how many people in the audience actually have cryptocurrency or been involved in it? Okay. I'm thinking that maybe in the future everyone's going to raise their hand, but you would have thought 2 years ago in 2017, if I was standing up here, everyone would have raised their hand. Everyone was getting involved in it. Everyone knew some obnoxious person that had made a lot of money either investing in crypto or lost a lot of money investing in crypto, or suddenly they were starting a blockchain company out of the blue. But you know, bubbles are not very new to the crypto space. If you've been involved in crypto and Bitcoin, you know that since the very beginning, Bitcoin has experienced a bubble in many, many times in its history. Most notably, when Bitcoin first started trading on exchanges in 2011, the price of a Bitcoin slowly rose up to $1 per Bitcoin. It hit parity with the US dollar, and then it went crazy and peaked at $32, crashed down 93% back down to $2, and took many, many years until we got to another bubble in 2013. In 2013, I think the price of Bitcoin entered the year at $10, and at its peak was around $1,200. So you could have made a 100x return on your investment just timing the market correctly. But of course, this pattern repeats over and over and over again. But what was different this time in 2017 is that it wasn't just about Bitcoin. It was about cryptocurrency in general, and now the term blockchain was being thrown around everywhere. A big event happened in 2014 when Ethereum raised their ICO, or their initial coin offering, where they sold their coins to investors for the first time. Ethereum was a groundbreaking ICO. They only raised $19 million, which is actually a pretty paltry amount if you compare it to some of the other obviously large raises that have come afterwards. But it was quite a return for the investors. They bought these coins at about 30 cents per Ether. And Ether ended up being at its peak somewhere around $400, so a 1,000x return on their investment. And that really kicked off the craze around ICOs. So suddenly we saw blockchain was going to change everything and be in every part of our lives. And CoinList, my company, launched with the Filecoin ICO you can see up here in the upper right in September of 2017. We were very surprised to raise $250+ million, which at the time was the largest crowdfunding campaign in history. Of course, that went on to be eclipsed by some of these other ICOs, including EOS and Telegram. So in 2017, it seemed like blockchain was just going to change everything. And some of that made sense. Finance, crowdfunding, governance with distributed autonomous organizations. Some of it was a little bit of a stretch. You know, Filecoin looking to replace something like Dropbox and file storage with a blockchain solution. And then some of them were absolutely ridiculous, like we had coins for dentists, we had coins for marijuana smokers, and things that were very clearly just plays to make a quick buck during the craze. In fact, one of my favorites in the United States is we have a tea company called Long Island Iced Tea. This is a very small company that's publicly traded, maybe somewhere around $10 to $20 million market cap, and they decided to change the name of their company from Long Island Iced Tea to Long Blockchain, and it worked. Overnight, the price of the stock shot up 500%, and people made a lot of money trading this ridiculous name change. Of course, knowing something about making tea does not in any way connect to knowing how to implement the latest bleeding edge technology in blockchain and something. But this was kind of the height of the craze. And of course now there's been a very heavy reality check. A lot of these projects are dead. People aren't really talking about blockchain. People have lost a lot of money on the investments they made at the peak. At the peak, we were looking at a market cap of all cryptocurrencies of $833 billion, which crashed pretty hard, but has recovered a little bit now to about $266 billion. Now, to put this into perspective, by the way, a $550 billion crash may seem like a lot of money to you and I, But that's really the price, the market cap of a company like Facebook. It's really a drop in the bucket in the global financial system. You know, the global GDP is somewhere in tens of trillions of dollars. So not really as bad as the dot-com bubble bursting, where you had many, many very large market cap companies getting their value wiped out. So in order to see where crypto is going to be relevant in the future, I think we have to kind of rewind to the beginning when everything started with Bitcoin in 2009. And usually when I'm giving this talk, funny enough, I like to talk about Iceland. And now that I'm in Scandinavia, maybe this hits a little closer to home and you may be familiar with this story. But in the global financial crisis, Iceland was actually the company that was hit the hardest. So all of the major banks in Iceland defaulted within weeks and totally collapsed. Foreign depositors lost all of their deposits in the banks. The currency lost half its value. The stock market crashed. There were capital controls put in place, so if you were in Iceland, you couldn't get your money out of the country, and it was a total financial mess. Riots ensued. And while this was happening, at the very exact time that this was happening on the streets of Reykjavik, the very first Bitcoin block was mined that same exact day that these riots were happening. And a lot of people may not know this, but inside the very first Bitcoin block was a little Easter egg, a message from the anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto, the person who we still have no idea who created Bitcoin, with a timestamp of the news of the day, which was that the Bank of England was on the verge of bailing out the banks in England for the second time in a row. So the point that Satoshi was kind of tongue-in-cheek making was that Bitcoin was here to arrive as a solution for the problems that we were having in the global financial system. So January of 2009 was a very, let me make sure I'm on time here, was a very active time in global financial crisis kind of reaching its meltdown phase. And at the exact same time that that was happening, Bitcoin was released to the public. So if you had talked to someone about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, you know, before the bubble in 2017, all they would ever talk about is fiat currency and how central banking is a mess and how Bitcoin is here to save us with hard money that has a monetary policy that is hard-coded that you can believe in, you know, like gold 2.0. And to be honest, that's still very true today. We have to realize that these institutions, these central banks, of course, I'm not a finance expert. I hope nobody in the audience is, because you may realize that I'm just talking as an armchair finance guy here. But we've seen some really crazy changes. Like in the United States, the monetary base, which is the amount of money in circulation, was $800 billion, slowly rising over time right up until the financial crisis. And then when the banks had to be bailed out, the taxpayers were put on the bill. The monetary base in the United States exploded to $4 trillion, so 5x the amount of money basically was not technically printed, but was put into the financial system to save it from collapsing. And of course, we have negative interest rates around the world. Denmark is known for having one of the lowest negative interest rates, and I found this very funny story actually that apparently you can get paid for taking out a mortgage in Denmark, which is kind of a sign of how things are going now with our central banking institutions. And you know, for the longest time, after World War II, in order to stabilize the world economy, we tied the value of our currency to gold, which was the Bretton Woods system. And the United States actually is the country that's responsible for pulling out of the Bretton Woods system and causing it to collapse. And you can see in this very interesting chart that this is a number of banking crises per year. During the Bretton Woods system, there were only two. After the Bretton Woods system ended and currencies started to float on the market and governments could print as much currency as they needed to, you see that the financial system got completely out of control. So as we look back 10 years later on the founding of Bitcoin, we're still just in as bad of a place financially, globally, than we were when Bitcoin launched. We have Brexit coming. The European Union is feeling the pain of that. Germany is reported to be going into a recession. The trade war that's going on between the US and China is hurting the global economy. And one example I like to call out in particular is Venezuela, which is really having one of the worst meltdowns. This is a story I don't think gets reported enough. Having one of the worst crises in modern civilization. It's reported that by the end of the year, 25% of Venezuelans will have fled their country because the economy is just completely falling apart there. Inflation is hitting 10 million%, which is a completely unthinkable number. It's even hard to imagine. But let's put it this way. 2 years ago, less than 1 bolivar, which is the banknote in Venezuela, would buy you a cup of coffee. Now, if you want to buy a cup of coffee in Venezuela, it takes 14,000 bolivars. You'd need to have a trash bag full of cash to go to the coffee shop and buy a coffee. In fact, it's more valuable to just use the banknotes to make art than it is to take them and use them as money. So of all the potential use cases that we were kind of all talking about what blockchain is going to do to change the world and have an impact on the world, I think it's really still finance, the core kind of competency behind what blockchain does, what Bitcoin was meant to do, and what we're seeing in a lot of these new projects and protocols which are being lumped into a term called DeFi, which stands for decentralized finance. Now, I don't really have, unfortunately, enough time to go into each of these one-on-one, but there's a lot of really fascinating stuff happening right now in DeFi. So Bitcoin was kind of the first attempt to say, let's take a concept like money and bring it into the 21st century with this amazing technology where we can, in a trustless manner, have some sort of monetary policy that everyone contributes to on the internet. Now we have things coming like, personally, my favorite are the stable coins like DAI. So a stable coin is a cryptocurrency that is pegged to the value of something else. In this case, each DAI is worth $1. Now, a lot of stable coins work in a centralized manner where you may have heard of Tether, where someone deposits money in a bank, $100 million maybe, and then $100 million of Tether is printed, and you just have to trust that that deposit is still there by that party that's managing it. Well, DAI manages to have a stable coin with absolutely nobody, well, I don't want to say absolutely no central party, but it's highly decentralized. It manages its own exchange rate, and I wish I could get into details, but A, I probably am not good enough to explain it to you, and B, we don't have enough time. But we also, another fascinating thing we have going on are decentralized exchanges. So in a typical exchange, if you and I are going to make a trade, there's a third party involved that we both trust that holds something in escrow. Once we've cleared the trade, that third party releases the collateral to both of us. Well, now that we have smart contracts and we have these large networks like 0x, we can trade whatever assets we want to in a decentralized way without having that central party. And we also have loans. Dharma Protocol is a great project that I like. I can't really get into again right now, but I hope you could check this out if you're interested. DYDX for derivatives, which is a very important financial instrument. You need to have a working financial system. And I'm hoping that in 10 years from now, as the global financial system that we've been living with for so long is starting to tear apart at the seams, we have the answer here with blockchain and this new DeFi movement to have maybe an alternative way that we can survive going forward without relying on the old financial institutions that are currently having so much trouble. And that's the end of my talk, so thanks for listening.